welcome to session 2. We're going to be talking about dangerously awake. This is like one of my favorite chapters. And I'm going to open up with a story. I'm going to try to actually open every session with a little story of the lion or the lioness. And, I want to underscore, just because it is a lioness doesn't mean it's not a lion. That's just the female term for the lion, but like a male dog and a female dog, I'm not going to say the term, but they're both dogs. And so anyway, we need to remember that you are, supposed to have those attributes of the lion and the lioness. And so I tortured my family watching documentaries, YouTubes. We had to watch Planet Earth, which made my children fall asleep. But we watched everything. I read children's book. I grabbed every bit of information I could because I actually found that even just watching the lion and the lioness did something inside of me that, we just lose that factor in our tame, sterile, barren, kind of clean, controlled, air-conditioned world. And so I needed to have a little feral mixed into my life, and I would watch them. And one of the documentaries I watched was actually the resettlement of one young lion and 2 lionesses into South Africa. And what had happened was, we aren't supposed to put wild things with domesticated things. And so the wild lions had been killing cattle. They were like, yay, look at this herd. They were killing cattle and killing the farmer's sheep. And you can't really use a fence to keep out a lion. And so they had gone ahead and created a reserve for the lions and lionesses in South Africa. And there had been a season of captivity while they created the reserve. And now it was time to reintroduce these young lions and lionesses. But there was 3 that had been born in captivity. They had never known the wild. They had never seen the wild. They were used to being fed by their trainers every day. And so what they did is they added actually a little annex of a fenced-in area to what would become their reserve to get them kind of used to their territory. And then after a while, they rolled back the fence, and they expected the 3 lions just to walk in. But they didn't. They were terrified, and they would actually walk the borders back and forth, but not cross where the fence had at one time been. And so they said, okay, we're going to have to do something to get them out into the wide open space that we prepared for them. And so what they did is they stopped feeding them. And then they killed a buck, and they put it well into the reserve area, and they watched and waited. And you know what? It took a long time for the hunger of those lions to override their hesitation. And even in the lion world, there's alpha lions and alpha lionesses. And the alpha lioness became increasingly restless, and she went back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And I don't know if the smell just finally got to her, but she leapt over into the new territory. And it was amazing. As soon as she leapt over, she looked back. And when she looked back, she kind of did this to her sister, and her sister leapt over as well. And they both looked at the lion, and he was like, no way. I am not coming out. I'm great staying here in this bush. I'm going to see if you guys die. And so he was just kind of hiding in this bush area. He was actually cowering. It was kind of embarrassing since he was the biggest. He was kind of cowering. And the 2 lionesses, they go out. They find what they've been downwind and smelling for so long. They find this big, it was pretty massive because it was for the 3 of this big buck. And they smell it. And then they did something amazing. You know what they did? They didn't start eating. These 2 lionesses dragged this kill back into the enclosure, not so they could be safe, but so that the lion could have the lion's share. And when I saw this, I thought, wow, are we that noble? Everything that begins should be first God's. And those lionesses seem to have this ability that maybe some of us have forgotten. When God opens up a banquet for us on one side, we don't just go and feast and forget about those that are behind. We need to bring back the goodness. And that lioness and those lionesses, they honored the lion that would be, not the one he was. And as women who God is opening up thresholds to us, we need to have this same mentality that we're not just going to go out and say, hey, chicken men, I'm sorry, we're going to have a banquet out here. If you guys can't get with the program, too bad. We say, no, we're supposed to do life together. And we bring the goodness back. Then they watched this lion and his two lionesses. Because, you know, when that happened, it was a defining moment probably for that relationship among that pride. See, he knew that they were for him and that they were going to establish him in strength. And so they'd established an area. There was other lionesses always trying to challenge, get him to come over their territory, but he was like, no way, these girls brought me the buck when I was scared. And so he had stayed with them, but he had a collar. And the collar was to track his movements. But the collar became a problem because lions will determine whether they're going to attack each other by the width of their mane. They eyeball each other, and if they realize they can't get their jaws around the other lion's neck, they will not confront them. But because the collar made his mane look smaller, this guy was getting attacked left and right, and he had scars to prove it. And so all these guys with dart guns and tranquilizers were so excited. They get in one of those, topless, carless, they just have no doors on them, vehicles, and you could smell the testosterone. They were going to tranquilize the lion, and they were going to remove the collar off of him. And the guys were like talking, and they're so excited, and they're going through the brush, and the camera's bouncing, and all of a sudden they see him, and he's magnificent. And the lion is a standout on the field. The lioness is stealth, but you can see his silhouette everywhere. And so they see him, they shoot him with the first dart, and it's like hanging off his leg. And he just looks at him like, what was that? And he just keeps walking. I mean, he's not even phased, he's not even tripping. And they're like, this is like super lion, we're gonna have to shoot him again. So they shoot him again, and he goes down, incapacitated, but not unconscious. And they're driving up, they're all excited, they're gonna take the collar off, the big super lion, when all of a sudden, there's a surprise for them. Up pops the lioness. And she's been there all along, but they didn't see her. And she begins to form a perimeter back and forth in front of the fallen lion. And she's like, no way, you're not coming through this. And she's back and forth. And I heard the commentators say, to get to him, we will have to tranquilize her. And I thought, that's what he's always done. To get to the men, the enemy will often tranquilize the women. So they shoot the lioness. She goes down. They jump off. They cut off the collar. Then they go and look at her. And they notice there's a thickening around her breast, among her midsection, and they know she has a child in her. So they know there's now legacy in her. And so they're checking her out, and the whole time they're checking her out, he is in the background growling. I mean, he is like, you better not mess with my woman. And so, he's like growling, and they make really quick work of her. They get the dart out of her, and they get back in the vehicle. They put it in high gear. They're speeding away. When I hear the narrator say, thank God we're safe, because there is nothing more dangerous than being in the presence of lions when they are fully awake. And when I heard the pairing of dangerous and fully awake, I thought, are we the church dangerous? And are we fully awake? Or are we conscious but incapacitated? Are we aware of what's going on, but just kind of laying on our side growling? You know what? We need to be dangerous and fully awake. You need to ask yourself, what is at risk if I am tranquilized? Who does the enemy attack if you are not conscious? So, this is what is before us as women. How does this happen to us? How do we get tranquilized? Nobody's shooting us with dart guns, but there's something that happens that actually is way more subtle. Romans 13, verses 11 through 14, I'm going to read out of the Message. It says, but make sure that you don't get so absorbed and exhausted in taking care of all your day-by-day obligations that you lose track of time and doze off, oblivious to God. When you're exhausted, when you're absorbed in your day by day, it doesn't mean we don't do it, but when you're absorbed by it, if it's all you think about, when it's what takes all of your energy, then you get exhausted. And when you get exhausted, you know what? You get oblivious to everything but your state of exhaustion. It says oblivious to God, which is what we need to know, what God is doing. And then it says The night is about over. Dawn is about to break. Be up and awake to what God is doing. Hey, we need to be awake to what God is doing. We don't need to be awake to what they're doing or what they're not doing or what we think they should do or what we think they shouldn't do. We need to be up and awake to what God is doing. You can look all over the earth and you can see that God has the widow, the orphan, the poor, the captive in mind. God is doing something in the church, and we need to be awake to what he is doing and get involved in what he is doing. Not, just be only aware of what other people are doing, because the day-to-day is exhausting. But when we do what God is doing, it's meat. It's strength. And it says God is putting the finishing touches on the salvation work he began. He's always been the one that began it when we first believed. We can't afford, you and me, sisters, we can't afford to waste a minute. Must not squander these precious daylight hours in frivolity, indulgence, in sleeping around, in dissipation, in bickering, and grabbing everything in sight. Get out of bed and get dressed. Don't loiter and linger, waiting until the very last minute. Dress yourself in Christ and be up and about. Who is responsible for keeping ourselves from getting absorbed? You are. It says, don't let yourself, that's that rise up, rouse yourself. You have to every day decide that your day will not absorb you. That your day will not suck you in and drain the life out of you. The opposite of absorb is to radiate. It's to release. It's to generously give out. But when you're absorbed, when something sucks the life out of you, I have so many women and they just say, you don't understand, you're saying change your world. I've just got kids and I'm trying to survive in myself. I do understand. Been there, done that. But even in that season, you need to say, this isn't what's going to absorb me. The busyness of this season isn't going to absorb me. My children are for signs and wonders. They are for destiny and not destruction. And you need to raise your children with a mindset. You're positioning them for strength, to be alert to what God is doing and not to be absorbed in that moment. We're responsible for what we allow to absorb and exhaust us. You say, well, my husband, no, I'm sorry, it's you. It's you. You have to decide what you're going to give your energy to and what you're going to get your life from. So we don't want to run so exhausted that we run the risk of being an oblivion Christian, incapacitated, growling, knowing something's going on, but not being able to find our feet. As the day begins, each of us has a journey every day, and it's a course of 24 hours. And Paul is actually saying, track the time. Track the time. And it's interesting. He starts with day, and then he goes hour and minute. It's that kind of, not even squander 1 minute. We need to, not squander means redeem it. Redeem it. That means you free it up for what's important. And so we all need to be people that free up our days for what's important. And don't say, well, Lisa said I don't have to do laundry. I do my laundry. I don't do my ironing because I'm awful, but I do my laundry. So I'm not talking about that, but it isn't what absorbs me. So there's a difference on the attitude on that. So we don't want to wander off course. We don't want to live in a state of exhaustion and miss the path. People fall asleep at the wheel, they swerve. We don't want to be swerving. We want to know what path we're on. And we don't want to be insensible to what God is doing because he's putting the finishing touch on everything he began. This is the most exciting time. Finishing touch. The final thing before the house is ready. So God is the author and he is finishing what he began. And so this is really a constant theme that is going to be find our feet, find up, get dressed, get in motion. And right now, we live in a very dangerous time. And I can't even tell you how dangerous it is. I've, been declaring for years that women are answers to problems, but we need to actually realize what that might look like. Go ahead and put the stat up. Right now, they're saying 50 million women are missing